Bienvenue! Welcome to this presentation of Nelson Explor-osité. To start, let's look at this poster. It shows a person's chances of success when engagement and attitude become more positive. In French teaching and learning, this means that students begin to take risks, when to use and reuse language, and to appreciate culture. One of the foundational principles of Nelson Explor-osité is that of discovery learning. Discovery learning allows students to pique their curiosity through rich questions and exploration-based tasks. The more they probe into what's possible, the more they take risks in carefully scaffolded activities that feature modeled, shared, guided, and independent practice. Nelson Explor-osité also allows students an opportunity to transfer learning and social strategies across a range of communicative activities. I mentioned the foundational principles of Nelson Explor-osité. These were born from our professional learning resources, strategies for success, and pathways oral language development in FSL. In any curriculum, a student's ability to give and receive language while at the same time broaden their dimensions of cultural understanding are integral to teaching and learning. These two professional learning documents will help provide context and depth in those two important language development factors. What's more, they offer suggestions for best practices around assessment. Of course, Provincial Curriculum is the foundational piece in the development of Nelson Explor-osité. Our author team consists of educators who are at the cutting edge of curriculum development. In addition, we also use support documents like the Common European Framework of Reference, or CEFR, to help guide the pedagogy of Nelson Explor-osité. Most core French curricula in Canada will at least reflect the spirit of the levels of proficiency of the CEFR to look at what a student can do. This is a document that looks at language acquisition through the lens of an action-oriented approach. Its main aim is to provide a method of learning, teaching, and assessing which applies to all languages. There are 6 reference levels, A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2, that are accepted as the benchmarks for an individual's language proficiency. For much of a student's time in elementary core French, they will likely be at the earliest stages of proficiency, A1 and A2. You can see a sample here of what the guidelines for that level will be like. Notice that using familiar expressions and basic phrases, asking and answering questions, and interacting in a simple way are part of A1. This applies to a variety of language learning situations as presented in Nelson Explor-osité. Let's start to apply these. First of all, what is Nelson Explor-osité? It is a 3-level resource for French as a second language. Each level has 4 kits under various organizers: Mon monde personnel, Mon monde médiatique, Mon monde civique, Mon monde interculturel. A general definition of literacy from UNESCO is the freedom to communicate and to make sense of one's world. Nelson Explor-osité supports this definition in second language learning, dividing a student's world into various literacies: personal literacy, media literacy, social literacy, and cultural literacy. Each kit has 2 modules shown under the organizer and laid out as home and school. We'll talk more about that later. Right now, we want to familiarize you with the words organizer, kit, and module. Look at level 2. It has the same organizers as level 1. There are different kits with different modules, but why the same organizer? Students are building language not only across a level as they progress through one grade, but also through several grades in order to both use and reuse functional language and to increase their repertoire of that functional language as their world expands. They start with their immediate surroundings of the house and the classroom in level 1, to Community and Beyond in levels 2 and 3. They also weave personal language, media language, citizenship language, and intercultural language back and forth across the levels and across the grades. For example, an appreciation of culture is an important part of every Nelson Explor-osité kit, but it's also given the spotlight under the organizer Mon Monde Interculturel. Upon completion of level 3, they will follow the same organizers. Here's a quick visual of the organizer across the 3 levels of Nelson Explor-osité. Again, the functional language starts with the student's immediate surroundings of house and classroom in level 1, and we add to that the community and beyond in levels 2 and 3. As I mentioned, there are 2 modules in each kit. These are presented in the form of a flipbook. There are several reasons, as you can see on this slide. For starters, our students have told us it's something cool and different. You'll also see by the pictures of the book that even though the students are learning about personal literacy, media literacy, etc., and the functional language is the same, the situations that the students encounter in one module will center around the home, while in the other module they center around the school. This allows us to offer more variety in the situations. Another reason, one module has a performance task that is oral production. Students are working individually, while the other module has an oral interaction performance task. Students are working with others. You get a rich variety of assessment. 2 modules allow you the possibility of holding one back for combined grade situations, or using them all in one year if you need to. There's more material at your disposal. Another reason for the flipbook is the shorter path to evaluation. You don't get stuck in one module and end up without evaluation for reporting, and I've been in this situation as a teacher. Finally, we offer a clear, direct link to the performance task in a 15-lesson sequence. As a teacher, you may have several ideas that enhance these modules. A direct link to the Mission Finale from Nelson Explor-osité and personalized input from you allows you to spend as much time or as little time as you like in each module. Nelson Explor-osité kits come in 2 formats, print and digital, with the same components. These are student books. There are 15 in the print kit. An audio CD with audio of all the module situations from the posters, student books, Mon Dossier, and Blackline Masters, including a song or poem and other audio that extends the learning beyond the module. A poster pack of 6 posters, a language context poster, poem, song, graphic organizer, learning strategy, and cooperative learning strategy poster. A digital resources DVD-ROM that has language support for each module. There are Blackline Masters for teacher observation and assessment, student peer and self-assessment. There are differentiation Blackline Masters, a module video, audio and video scripts, an image bank, and the e-book and e-posters with embedded audio. Finally, there is a teacher's resource binder. The print is contained in a kit bag, and of course the digital is contained in cyberspace. Now let's look at a module. The title of both sides of the flipbook are questions. This is because we are asking students to use functional language in various situations, and the theme is embedded in those situations. As they work through various scenarios, students will continue to learn about themselves and others in order to be able to answer the questions of these modules. Remember, this reflects the A1 level of language in the CEFR, that is, to ask and answer questions about personal details. We are going to be using the module Qui suis-je, or Who am I, from Level 1 Mon Monde Personnel. This module, entitled Qui suis-je, focuses on students at home in various situations. They will be able to answer who am I, or qui suis-je, as they use and reuse language about their family, their home, animals, preferences, etc. The thematic language is part of the situations, not the focus of the functional language. I mentioned a 15-lesson sequence. There are 4 phases to each sequence, as shown in this slide. Parlons in lessons 1 to 4, Explorons in lessons 5 to 8, À l'action in lessons 9 to 12, and Célébrons in lessons 13 to 15. You can also see on this slide the strand development, which clearly shows the focus on listening and speaking. When you look at Parlons in the student book, there's only one page called Parlons. That's because Nelson Explor-osité is a multi-component resource that aims to have students seeing and using French in various resources that they would see in other subject areas: posters, interactive whiteboard lessons, graphic stories, etc. In the Parlons phase, students are using more than the student book to build a performance task called la mission finale. Let's look at that mission finale. We start with the teacher's resource. The 4 phases of each module culminate in the performance task outlined here in a page entitled Getting Started with Functional Language. It identifies what the mission finale will be. In this case, it is an oral interaction task, and the students will be working with each other. In an oral production task, the students would be working individually. It also describes the mission finale. It provides a sample of the mission finale. This one looks rather long for a beginner, but that's because it's the task of 2 students. The red arrows indicate the dialogue of 1 student. As you read through this, you'll notice how much use and reuse of language happens in Nelson Explor-osité. As beginning language learners, students need to know what the functional language is in both the question and the response. Remember, the A1 description of language proficiency says that students will ask and answer simple questions. Nelson Explor-osité does that in a way that enhances functional language and scaffolds the language towards the mission finale. There is also a section which identifies the models of functional language the students will be exposed to throughout the lesson sequence. And finally, this page reminds you to use your curriculum document as a guide in multi-grade classrooms. The functional language page from the teacher's resource is linked to the student book, and here it's outlined in the opening pages. The students are given the opportunity to understand the gist of the mission finale and the linguistic content they will encounter in this module. Here, in the opening, it acts as an anchor to the module, and here it serves as the catalyst for the students to begin their own version of the mission finale in the à l'action phase in lessons 9 to 12. This page shows students a sample of what the mission finale could be, as well as the points de contrôle. The points de contrôle are a checklist of the mechanics for completing the performance task. They always involve working with peers, even when the performance task is oral production. Students brainstorm, peer edit, use and reuse language. The mission finale is scaffolded all the way through. Here is the Parlons phase. This is lesson 4 with the module video. A friend is introducing her new neighbor to another friend. This is a model of what the student's mission finale could look like, but it also consolidates all the language the students have encountered in the Parlons phase. In fact, the students see this at the end of the Parlons phase to consolidate this language, and then they see it again in the à l'action phase in lesson 9 as they begin to work on their own mission finale. At this point, students have been exposed to the functional language in a variety of Nelson Explor-osité components. Not only have students had the opportunity to use and reuse functional language to interact with each other, with the support of the variety of components and the variety of text types, they also have been exposed to a variety of scenarios in which the functional language is used. From the module video, students have an opportunity to draw an idea for their own mission finale in Mon Dossier. Mon Dossier is an optional component of Nelson Explor-osité that helps them record their progress towards the mission finale. Note that they are not writing, they are drawing. Nelson Explor-osité encourages students to use graphic text as another text type. Mon Dossier is not the same as the Blackline Masters found on the Digital Resources DVD-ROM. It is an optional component because the students can use their own tools to record their progress. The Blackline Masters on the Digital Resources DVD-ROM are tracking sheets, assessment Blackline Masters, and activities that are meant to extend the learning beyond the module. Let's return to the Parlons phase, lessons 1 to 4. As stated, Nelson Explor-osité is a multi-component resource, and we want students to encounter French in a variety of ways. The student book is only part of that. The student book has a very magazine-y style and not a lot of instruction. French should occur around them as naturally as English. The first part of the Parlons phase begins with the language context poster. This allows you and your students to prepare for the language needed for the mission finale. Nelson Explor-osité leads with modeling orally what the students will need using audio tools and then encouraging the students to use and reuse the language. On this slide you'll see 3 things. The entire poster with all the images from both modules of the Mon Personnel kit. A single image from the Digital Resources DVD-ROM image bank, and a portion of the audio script for image A. What you also see on the poster are 2 small speaker icons. If you are using the e-poster from the Digital Resources DVD-ROM or the online version, there is embedded audio. If you are using the print version, the audio is on the audio CD. When you are doing this for the first time with your students, I would not go straight to the audio. Students always find a speaker other than those they are used to difficult to understand. A best practice to introduce the module might be the following. Refer to the Getting Started with Functional Language page in the teacher's resource to know what the functional language of the module is. Start with your own personal story related to the poster in a think aloud. Ask and answer your own questions about preferences, members of your family, your birthday, etc. Use that same think aloud model and move to the poster. Here's an example for image A. Voici Alison dans l'image A. Elle a une activité préférée. Qu'est-ce qu'elle aime? Est-ce qu'elle aime faire de la bicyclette ou est-ce qu'elle aime faire du ski? Moi, je pense que Alison aime faire de la bicyclette. Before you play the audio, ask students to think about what they are listening for. Set a purpose for listening. For example, what is Alison's favorite activity in image A? What's the name of the boy in image B? What's the girl's favorite animal in image C? Or what's the age of the boy in image D? Remember, Nelson Explor-osité is about the functional language. You can certainly personalize the teaching and learning here by including a survey of pets among your students and providing a list or survey of birthdays and ages, or perhaps a survey of favorite activities. That's why the lessons are not called Day 1, but Lesson 1. You can take all the time you need to explore each functional language piece of Nelson Explor-osité. Here's an example of Lesson 1. First you see the Parlons icon because Lesson 1 is part of that phase. Beside that is the gradual release of responsibility process that you will use to get the students to engage in active listening, the instructional focus of this lesson. This lesson doesn't ask for them to repeat verbatim what the audio script is. It simply asks them to show that they are listening attentively. This is an excellent tip for you to know what to assess when it comes to listening. You'll see the same suggestions in the Assessment for Learning box at the bottom of page 1, and the suggestions to use smaller portions of the poster, as I showed, in the differentiated instruction section. When you look at step 1 of the lesson plan on the opposite page, you'll see how many times the word model is used. You'll also see the instruction to provide a purpose for listening before playing the audio. The model teacher language that is provided in French here is just that, a model for the teacher. You will choose to explore the language context poster with your students using language that works for you and for them. The model language is meant to be a guide, not a script. While we're here, we can look at the can-do statements. Going back to the CEFR and the can-do statements that will be reflected, you'll see here in Lesson 1 a strategy about modeling the Nelson Explor-osité can-do statements. This is done early and often until the students are able to independently identify the can-do statements as shown here in the student book on page 14. When people communicate, they use strategies to help them give and receive information and to make sense of their world. Every Nelson Explor-osité kit uses literacy tools to help students do just that. The Learning Strategy poster here is Making Connections, and the link to that is found in the student book as shown here from the Explorons phase. There are cooperative learning posters that remind students, like this one, about attentive listening or active listening. And there are graphic organizers like this Venn diagram, laminated for use and also available as a Blackline Master. There are a variety of learning strategies, cooperative learning strategies, and graphic organizers in Nelson Explor-osité kits that are activated at key teaching and learning opportunities. Strategies are also an important part of the instructional focus of each lesson plan. Again, this helps with assessment when we consider what to assess and how to do so. Best practices for assessment include valid and varied feedback. Ongoing assessment is part of Nelson Explor-osité, and you can see that here in the many opportunities for assessment for, of, and as learning, in the oral interactions the students have with you and their peers, in the observations and reflections supported in the Blackline Masters, and of course in the Mission Finale. Each lesson plan of Nelson Explor-osité starts with assessment tips and ends in step 4 with linking instructional goals to assessment. Here are some comments from our reviewers and teachers using Nelson Explor-osité. Of all the resources available, this is the best one because it really supports the students on their way to the performance task. I also used and appreciated the teacher's guide, especially for the pointers on how to prepare students to listen for specific information and activate their prior knowledge. I love this resource. Instead of simply theme teaching, this incorporates language learning in an interesting way. It provides meaningful dialogue, allowing students to make connections to the world, text, and peers. The illustrations are fantastic. I am impressed with the module's focus on oral communication in authentic situations. Two strengths of the program are purposeful oral interactions and cultural and intercultural explorations. If you'd like to find out more about Nelson Explor-osité, or you want to review some of what we talked about here today, there are 2 sites that you can go to for more information. I've given you a brief overview of Nelson Explor-osité, a rich and exciting resource. Merci et bonne journée.